Welcome to Military Analytics. The sounds of ambulance began to echo in the Kremlin. Putin's illness has hit hard this time. However, the Ukrainian army now has the upper hand. The Russian people have begun to claim with great anxiety that Putin is no longer able to govern them. Tensions on the streets of Moscow have reached a fever pitch, with Putin's policies resonating around the world. Russian President Vladimir Putin has been the sole power in Russia for nearly 30 years. Although many bad decisions have been made during this period, Putin, who supposedly enjoys popular support, continues his oppressive rule in many areas. But recent developments have shown that Putin's illness has reappeared. This has been a matter of great fear, both in the Russian army and among Putin's supporters, because Putin's illness will bring with it a very big problem. As it is known, Putin spent his youth in the KGB, where he received very heavy training. During this period, it is known that Putin had a severe illness, such as pneumonia, and came back from the brink of death. Although Putin survived this incident, this disease never left him in the future because as he aged, it recurred again. And according to the information learned by our sources in the Kremlin, the ambulance came to this region, took one person, and left. While this information had a great impact all over the world, it once again showed the whole world how troubled Putin's health was. Putin's behavior, especially in recent live broadcasts, has been noticed by war analysts and many figures. It was determined that Putin, who is now much more irritable than before, sometimes cannot control his hands and legs. So the broadcasts were interrupted early. The situation strengthens the possibility that Putin may have Parkinson's disease, which is especially common in former boxers and combat sports athletes. The real problem was that the pro-Putin agencies tried to hide it. But no matter how hard they try, Putin is now at a huge disadvantage against Ukraine. His erratic and angry moves only encourage more people to support Ukraine. In the aftermath of this situation, the Ukrainian army has now reached a point where it is on the verge of victory, and the Russian media has begun to focus on something completely different. Putin's treacherous plan has been revealed. Putin revealed the fact that the war in Ukraine was at a point where it could be lost in the propaganda films he showed to his citizens. With this, it became clear once again how much superiority the Ukrainian army has over the Russians. Although Putin is constantly making moves to destroy this portrait of a sick man, the Russian people are now very uncomfortable with this situation and have decided to organize a huge protest against it. Attendance at Putin's rallies in Russia has dropped considerably in recent days, but the other factor that attracts attention is Putin's mysterious stunt doubles. According to sources in the Kremlin, it has been revealed that there are about 8 names that Putin uses as body doubles. These people take part in Putin's rallies and are responsible for keeping the secrets of Putin, who has been unable to stand up in recent days. But the real problem was recorded as the problems in the administration, as the problem in Putin's long screw. These facts resonated all over the world. Putin is now in a position where he cannot even stand up at his rallies. It turned out that Putin was sent to a different region from the Kremlin for treatment. Putin, who wanted to run the administration from outside the Kremlin, made a mess of everything in this regard. And Putin's world started to be run by the bureaucrats around him. This is thought to have played a major role in Russia's political instability and many problems, such as the defeat by Ukraine. Because Putin was not seen as a leader who would make such bold moves against Ukraine, instead of Putin, who acted very cold-blooded and cautious and avoided moves that would put Russia in trouble. We see a Putin who has made a lot of mistakes and succumbed to his arrogance in recent days. As a result, the victory of the Ukrainian army against the Russians is expected to deepen, but a very big problem has been revealed in Russia. Putin's bureaucrats don't know where to run. A large number of protesters in Russia have started collecting signatures, arguing that the war against Ukraine is irrational and that a peace decision should be made in this area. These signatures exceeded 2 million in about a week, but Putin started to ignore these signatures. This only served to undermine trust in Putin. If this continues, it is expected that the people will ask Putin to step down from power in a very short time. The anti-war protesters have turned Moscow into a firestorm. It is only a matter of time before things get even more complicated. Putin has ruled Russia single-handedly for nearly 30 years. Everyone around him has been complicit in Putin's crimes and war crimes. In the event of regime change, Putin is expected to be put on trial, and many international courts have ordered his arrest. These decisions also mean that a large number of bureaucrats in Putin's circle would also be put on trial. That's why each of the teams with the most influence in Russia's governance has started to take steps to counter this. Because if Putin falls, many of their networks will be depleted, and they will have to face the danger of being prosecuted. And since there is nothing Putin can do about it, the solution is to prevent Putin from falling. But the real mistake was Putin's disgraceful behavior over Ukraine. And these humiliations have become the basis for Russia to face even bigger problems. Since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, the Russian army has lost approximately 200,000 soldiers. Many tanks and airplanes have also been lost thanks to Ukraine's successful and targeted operations. The Russian army has been unable to gain ground on Ukrainian soil. Putin, on the other hand, has not suffered a defeat in the 30 years of his rule. So he cannot accept these defeats against Ukraine. If this continues, the Russian army will start to face even greater losses. And because of the moves he has made at certain points, it is only a matter of time before Ukraine achieves very serious successes, especially in foreign policy. Because Putin has started to blame Western support for Ukraine for this defeat. At the same time, he started making very harsh rhetoric and threats against each of those countries. Things became more complicated because of these moves, and the defeats against the Ukrainian army took another turn, as countries all over the world started to support Ukraine and take steps against Russia. Due to the increase in both the quality and quantity of the support, the Ukrainian army has reached a very different point. The Russian army has started to change its stance in the war because it is facing a very big problem. As a result, it is quite possible that Russia will face huge tensions. The comments made by war analysts on this issue resonated all over the world. According to war analysts, the Ukrainian army is preparing to take very big steps against the Russians in a short time. The main reason for this is that the Ukrainian army has the quality and quantity to advance against the Russians in a short period of time and achieve a significant victory. In a short period of time, the Ukrainian army can utilize reinforcements sent for the most critical operations. And this operation could deal Putin the most unwanted blow. These blows could soon reshape a lot of things, increasing the Ukrainian army's gains, and it could be officially declared that the Russian army has lost. Russia's losses are expected to increase in certain areas in a very short period of time. And it is possible that as these losses continue, the Ukrainian army will step by step approach the necessary victory. Is the Battle of Bakhmut the beginning of the end, or the end of the beginning? The rapidly deteriorating situation in the eastern stronghold of Bakhmut is becoming increasingly bleak for Russian President Vladimir Putin. General Valery Gerasimov has still not succeeded in capturing the city as ordered, and Ukrainian forces have begun to aggressively exploit the growing military and psychological advantage. The routed Russian troops were filmed fleeing their battle positions, laying down their weapons, and surrendering. Bakhmut rises again like an ancient Greek phoenix, and Yevgeny Prigozhin reduced himself to the chorus in a Greek tragedy. In the past few days, the founder of the Wagner Group has repeatedly appeared on Telegram to detail every strategic mistake made in Bakhmut by General Valery Gerasimov and Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu. Yevgeny Prigozhin blamed the unfortunate couple for the reasons why the Russian troops fled. What Prigozhin did was not limited to this. The Wagner leader, who had been in a close relationship with Vladimir Putin for years, was ready to stab the Russian leader in the back. Vladimir Putin would have to contend with treason, as well as the failures of his army. Leaked U.S. intelligence documents reported that Prigozhin showed that if Kiev withdrew its forces from the Bakhmut front, he offered to reveal the location of regular Russian troops in the Donbass. The head of the Wagner mercenary group offered to disclose the positions of the Russian troops to the Ukrainian government. Two Ukrainian officials confirmed that Prigozhin had spoken to Ukrainian intelligence several times. However, Kiev refused the offer as they did not trust Prigozhin and were unsure of his true intentions. Prigozhin denied allegations of betraying Vladimir Putin in a voice message posted on Telegram. The Wagner leader said people from Rubliovka, a luxury Moscow suburb where the Russian elite lives, may be behind the allegations. Prigozhin's relationship with the Kremlin continues to deteriorate, whether it's a Russian game or Ukrainian disinformation. At the same time, Prigozhin's latest behavior definitely shows that there is no love left between the Wagner and the regular Russian army. In this epic process, the Wagner chief clashed with the army chiefs many times over the supply of support and ammunition. The Wagner leader threatened to withdraw his fighters from Bakhmut to lick his wounds after angrily accusing Kremlin officials of withholding ammunition earlier this month. Prigozhin added that he was waiting for the order to leave from Bakhmut. Considering what happened between Prigozhin and the Kremlin administration, it seems almost impossible that the allegations of betrayal are not true. It is quite possible that the Wagner leader, distraught by the whereabouts of his troops in the war, chose such a path to take revenge on the Russian army. So, what is the current situation in Bakhmut? Things are not going well for Wagner and Russia. Putin's house of cards is about to collapse. His grand design of holding a Victory Day celebration on Red Square to commemorate Bakhmut's fall has now been replaced by the humiliating image of Russian soldiers fleeing the Ukrainian salt mining town and surrounding areas as quickly as possible. Everything is deserved, but must not be forgotten. Irut does not win the war. Ukraine's deputy defense minister said Kyiv forces captured more than 10 Russian positions on the outskirts of the frontline city of Bakhmut. The deputy defense minister stated that fierce clashes continue in Bakhmut, located in the eastern region of Donetsk, and that the Russians are trying to advance and destroy everything in their path. Now, the primary challenge for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is quickly identifying and removing the remaining elusive card that could bring Putin's house down. The decisive blow has not yet been struck by Zelensky's generals. Although Bakhmut is the focal point of the war in the eyes of the global media, and they focus on Ukraine's success there, the challenge Ukraine faces is greater than a single city. As Zelensky searches for that decisive card, he draws upon the skills he learned in his acting days and creates tension. Meanwhile, many experts classify the local success in Bakhmut as the beginning of the long-awaited Ukrainian counteroffensive. There may be some truth in this. At the very least, this is an indication that many Russian ground forces have hit the wall, and that neither Kremlin coercion nor Prigozhin's deceptions will keep them on their battle positions without bullets from Stalin's successors. More likely, however, Ukraine was merely testing Russia's defenses and achieved an unexpected battlefield response. The absence of any meaningful brigade or regiment-sized tactical formations of the combined arms force in Ukraine, consisting of tanks, infantry, artillery, and air support, indicates that they remained purely research or armed reconnaissance operations or, in some cases, local counterattacks. Ukrainian forces were probably taken aback by the way the Russian troops endured. But is this an indication of future Russian activity on a 900-mile front? Or is it simply a limited response to months of persistent, fierce melee combat at Bakhmut under deplorable conditions? Indicatively, it would be wise to fold the Putin cards, count a day, and withdraw from all of Ukraine before Zelensky finds the right card to beat the Russian army wholesale. The UK Ministry of Defense estimates that there are currently more than 200,000 Russian troops in Ukraine, similar in size to the original occupying force. According to the UK Ministry of Defense, Russia's forces are organized into approximately 70 combat regiments and brigades divided into 5 force groups. However, as the ministry noted, there are significant contrasts between today and February 24, 2022. At the beginning of the war, Putin's army consisted of professional soldiers. The Russian army was largely equipped with highly modern vehicles and was regularly deployed for complex joint operations. More recently, Putin's forces have been viewed as mostly poorly trained, mobilized reservists who increasingly rely on obsolete equipment. More succinctly, Putin's army is advancing empty-handed. In addition, the UK recently announced that it has provided the precision attack capability needed to help Ukraine win the war. The Storm Shadow air-launched cruise missile extended Ukraine's operational range to over 250 kilometers. Now Crimea has officially entered the game. As a result, the strategy of making Crimea untenable, as advocated by retired Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, becomes possible. Storm Shadow also puts at risk Russian cruise missile and drone launch sites, as well as preparation areas for Russian troops beyond the Ukrainian border. Storm Shadow invalidates the arbitrary refuge that Russian territory has ever offered. In essence, these missiles help level the playing field in favor of Ukraine, as HIMARS did. British and French-made long-range missiles are becoming a new reality, putting Russian propagandists into a complete crisis mode. Russian media expert and Daily Beast columnist Julia Davis now wonders if Russia can protect its territory as a result. Bakhmut is rising from here. A phoenix has the resilient and bold Ukrainian colors of yellow and blue. Putin's red phoenix is on the run and is increasingly attacked by Prigozhin. In its latest report, the Institute for War Studies assessed that Ukrainian forces liberated an area of 16.85 kilometers squared in the Bakhmut region in the recent counterattack, and that even more significant gains may be possible in the short term. Russian forces failed to stabilize the front line. Ukraine's full-throttle counterattack is yet to come, but it is being built quickly. While many on both sides are prepared for this to happen, Zelensky and his generals will not rush it. Zelensky made it clear that he wanted more time and weapons to ensure his success. Ukraine is starting to wave its flag more and more in the once Russian-occupied areas of Bakhmut and the surrounding region that form Russia's flanks. What will be Vladimir Putin's response to the latest situation in Bakhmut and the betrayal of the Wagner leader? We will have to wait and see. France announced a sanctions package so big that it caused a huge repercussion all over the world. When France sat at the table with China, Putin officially went crazy. Russia will no longer be able to supply the products necessary for armament in any way. In response to these moves, many Russian factories, including the Russian defense industry, went bankrupt. After the events and statements, Putin officially went crazy. Putin's ally behind this step created a shock effect all over the world in the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. Many developments have started to take place recently. Putin's recent statements and policies have started to cause great troubles, and the world at large has decided to intervene by announcing that it will not allow this. However, the move that can be intervened in the war can trigger the Third World War. Being aware of the situation, the pro-Ukrainian countries were only focusing their efforts on increasing the armament of the Ukrainian forces. Russia's organizing a new attack on Ukrainian territory every day. And in response to this, the move to stop Putin came from France. Unbelievable tactics. Many European Union countries, especially the United States, have mobilized to ensure that Ukrainian forces are ahead of Russian forces. However, the worldwide crisis has begun to change the nature of the conflict. At the forefront of this support was the Ukrainian army's ability to protect itself in the best possible way. In recent days, the fact that this support is now directed towards attack has caused some countries to react. These developments, which managed to arouse a great echo all over the world, have weakened the defensive position of the Russian army, due to the fact that a large number of tanks offered to the Ukrainian army were intended for attack. However, the French government, which began to realize that this was not a retreat but a great preparation, came up with an ingenious idea. The support given to the Ukrainian army to organize operations from many points has created a big crack in NATO. The basis of these cracks was the idea that the aid could bring about World War III. Croatia and Hungary showed the biggest reaction in this regard. The Russian army is quite surprised that these two countries support Ukraine. In contrast to these two countries, which have been trying to maintain a neutral stance since the beginning of the war, NATO in general has started to act in agreement on the best way to support the Ukrainian forces. At this point, France, like many other countries, announced that it was in favor of external support. However, this support, which could become a direct intervention in the war, created a huge problem for the Russian military industry. As a result of these decisions taken by France, Russian arms factories, which had to stop production, started to announce that they could go bankrupt in a short time. As it is known, the fact that Russia is in a great economic crisis shows us that it cannot support these factories in any way. The fact that the point that caused this economic crisis to be experienced is entering such a big crisis shows that Russia can regress significantly on the battlefield. After France's decision, the pro-Ukrainian countries, who saw that Russia suffered a major blow, decided to impose a major sanction on Russia by adopting the same attitude as France. No one knows what Russia will become as a result of these sanctions. It is evident that citizens in the country are facing a big problem with the economic crisis. Russian citizens are almost unsure of what to do about it. Putin, who has not shown any retreat after all these events, is taking steps to prove that he will organize a major operation no matter what. Although the effect of the attacks organized every day is diminishing, there is no end in sight. Aware of this, France decided to make an agreement with the countries from which Russia sources many metals, sitting at the table with China, one of the countries we mentioned. France rolled up its sleeves to gain commercial privileges. France, which is trying to align China completely on its side and deal a significant blow to Russia, has started to greatly disrupt Russia's supply chain thanks to these new agreements. Following this disruption, many factories in Russia, especially those working for the military, have started to declare bankruptcy. This step by France was one of the points that drove Putin crazy. One of the items Russia needs the most is machinery. These machines are of great importance for Russia and the Russian army. However, France, thanks to its negotiations with machine manufacturers, has started to deplete stocks in many areas. After these stocks were depleted so quickly, high prices started to be paid for products that were fully prepared to be sold to Russia. With these high prices, Russia was unable to carry out any activity in its factories. While the crucial point for Russia was the development of factories, they could no longer produce in any way. The most felt impact on Russia was on the front lines in Ukrainian territory. The Russian army is very worried about being disarmed after the sanctions. As the factories producing ammunition and weapons in Russia closed down one by one due to high prices, Putin did not know what to do. After that, Putin decided to sit at the table with countries that could cause great difficulties. The fact that this situation was in favor of Putin was proof that world peace would not be achieved in any way. With the Russian army having weakened significantly, it no longer had even the slightest prestige. So who was this secret ally? From the very beginning of the war, no country was determined to support Russia. But the opposite was true for a specific country we are going to talk about. The aim of this country was to show the world that Russia, which had many embargoes, was not completely alone, and that country is Iran. Putin sat at the table with Iran at the beginning of the war. Even though the United States imposed an embargo on Iran in many areas, Russia did not care about this issue. And anyway, arms trade with Iran was banned by the entire United Nations. But Putin, who was determined not to care about any of this, placed a very large arms order to Iran after the ban. Putin's move was at the top of the world press for days and drew a huge reaction. Ukraine had managed to establish a huge superiority over Russia on the battlefield, especially in terms of unmanned aerial vehicles. The fact that Ukraine had such great power began to undermine almost all of Russia's ground operations. Because of this situation, Putin also wanted to acquire a large number of drones, but countries such as Turkey and Israel opposed Putin's request. Putin, on the other hand, took action to buy drones, which were not very good in their field, from Iran. This created a great surprise in the world. The quantity he ordered from Iran could change the world's situation considerably. He placed an order with Iran for 1,000 unmanned aerial vehicles to be added to the inventory of the Russian army. Not only would these drones circumvent the embargo, but they would also create a major crisis for the Russian military. However, Iran's support to Russia did not stop with drones. Iran started to produce 30,000 artillery shells for Russia daily. This meant that Iran's factories were officially working exclusively for Russia. How Russia would fulfill its orders to Iran under such severe sanctions became a matter of global curiosity. Despite the sanctions, calls continued to come from many countries for Putin to stop. However, Putin, who has started to experience such great difficulties, continues to ignore these calls in any way.